In 1954, a psychologist named Muzafer Sharif took 22 ordinary boys to a summer camp in Oklahoma. They were healthy, well-adjusted, from stable homes. He split them into two groups, gave each group a name, and within days, something happened that nobody in the study had predicted. The boys who had arrived as strangers became brothers, not because of shared values, not because of shared interests, because they had someone to be against. Sharif had accidentally discovered one of the oldest engines in human psychology. The experiment is called the Robbers Cave Study. And what Sharif found was not that conflict was inevitable between groups. It was something stranger and more specific than that. He found that the mere existence of another group was enough to generate hostility. He had not told the boys to compete. He had not created scarcity or rivalry. He had simply let each group know the other existed. Within days, the boys were raiding each other's cabins, burning each other's flags, refusing to eat in the same cafeteria. Boys who had been complete strangers 4 days earlier now described members of the other group as enemies. Not rivals, enemies. And here is what Sharif noticed that most people forget when they cite this study. The hostility did not just create conflict between the groups. It created something inside each group that had not been there before. Cohesion, identity, a feeling of mattering. The boys did not just hate the other group. They loved their own group more because the other group existed. The enemy was not a problem the groups had to manage. The enemy was the source of the groups themselves. This is not unique to boys at summer camp in 1954. This is one of the most replicated findings in social psychology. Henri Tajfel at the University of Bristol spent years studying what he called social identity theory. He found that humans do not need a real conflict, a real grievance, or even a real difference to form an in-group and treat an out-group with hostility. You can divide people randomly. You can flip a coin. You can tell half a room they prefer one abstract painting over another. Within minutes, the groups are favoring their own members, discriminating against the other side, and reporting higher self-esteem specifically because they belong to their group. The enemy does not have to be real. It just has to be there. But why? Why are human brains built this way? The answer sits in evolutionary biology, and it is older than civilization. For the vast majority of human existence, your ancestors did not live in cities or nations or abstract communities. They lived in small bands of roughly 50 to 150 people, and those bands existed in a world where resources were limited, and other bands of humans were the most dangerous competitors for those resources. The brain that learned to bond tightly with its own group and treat outsiders with immediate suspicion was the brain that survived. The brain that extended equal trust to everyone was the brain that got its food stolen, its territory taken, and its children killed. Over hundreds of thousands of years, natural selection did not just permit the tendency to form in-groups and out-groups. It required it. It baked it into the architecture of the human mind so deeply that we cannot simply decide to stop doing it. And here is where it gets neurochemical. When you perceive a shared threat with the people around you, your brain releases oxytocin. Oxytocin is commonly described as the bonding hormone, the molecule responsible for the warmth you feel toward your children, your closest friends, the people you love most. But researchers including Karsten de Droo at the University of Amsterdam have found something about oxytocin that its reputation does not prepare you for. Oxytocin does not just bond you to your group. It simultaneously increases your hostility toward anyone outside it. The same molecule that makes you love your people makes you fear and distrust everyone else. Bonding and threat perception are not separate systems running in parallel. They are the same system. You cannot fully activate one without activating the other. This means that the feeling of deep human connection, the feeling of truly belonging to something, of standing shoulder to shoulder with people who matter to you, is neurochemically inseparable from the presence of a shared enemy. Your brain does not know how to produce that feeling without one. Now look at what this means at the scale of civilizations. Historians have documented a pattern so consistent it approaches a rule. Societies that face a clear external threat, a war, an invasion, a competing power, show dramatically lower rates of internal conflict during the period of that threat. Political divisions narrow, class tensions reduce, cooperation increases. The moment the threat disappears, the internal fracturing begins. The Roman Republic's worst period of civil war followed its destruction of Carthage, its last great rival. The United States reached its highest recorded levels of bipartisan cooperation during the Cold War. The moment the Soviet Union collapsed, the internal culture wars accelerated within a decade. This is not coincidence. This is the in-group mechanism running exactly as designed, searching for an enemy because it was built to always have one. And here is the part that is genuinely hard to sit with. Modern liberal democracies have spent the last several decades doing something unprecedented in human history. They have worked with real success to reduce traditional sources of shared threat. Violent crime is down. Interstate warfare between developed nations is at historic lows. Extreme poverty has declined dramatically. By almost every objective measure, the threats that used to bind human communities together have weakened. And the result has not been an era of unprecedented social harmony. The result has been an era of unprecedented internal fragmentation. Political polarization in the United States reached levels in the 2000s not seen since the Civil War era. Social trust, the simple willingness to trust strangers, has declined in nearly every developed nation for 30 consecutive years. Loneliness rates have climbed to epidemic levels. These things are not unrelated. They are the same phenomenon. The enemy need did not go away. It went inward, and it found new targets among the people standing closest to them. This does not mean that enemies are good. It does not mean that civilization should manufacture external threats to keep itself together. It means something more uncomfortable than that. It means that the need for a shared enemy is not a bug in human psychology that education and enlightenment will eventually fix. It is a feature. It is structural. Any society that does not consciously account for it and redirect it will have it redirected for them automatically toward whoever is most conveniently different. Sheriff understood this. At the end of the Robbers Cave experiment, after the two groups of boys had spent weeks in open hostility, he tried to reconcile them. He brought them together for meals. It made things worse. He tried appeals to fairness. It did nothing. What finally worked was giving both groups a shared problem that neither could solve alone. A water supply failure that threatened the whole camp. A truck that needed all hands to push. The moment both groups had a shared obstacle, the hostility dissolved faster than it had formed. Within days, boys who had been burning each other's flags were sharing food and trading names. Sheriff called it the superordinate goal, a challenge large enough that your in-group alone cannot meet it. Something that forces the boundary of who counts as us to expand. Climate change has been proposed as one. So has space exploration. So has pandemic preparedness. Whether any of these can function as a genuine superordinate goal for a species as fragmented as ours is a question nobody has answered yet. But the experiment is still sitting there in the data. 22 ordinary boys. One summer camp. A finding that has replicated across cultures, across continents, across decades of research. The need for a shared enemy is not something humans grow out of. It is something humans must consciously choose what to do with. And most of us, most of the time, are not choosing at all. We are just looking for someone to be against, and finding them faster than we ever found each other.